discuss about the winners of the last two races. And going forward for the Berlin track, we have a brand new champion. Techeetah Antonio Felix da Costa is your new champion. And what's going to happen ahead in 2021 for the Formula E Series? Formula E Zone and Grid Network welcome you to Formula E Best. Hello everyone, Joe Samaniego here. Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. Welcome to Formula E Fest wrap-up edition. Essentially, we are wrapping up the show as the season has already come to an end for the ABB Formula E season. Now with me, of course, as I mentioned, is Kobe Lambeth. Kobe's been a fun 9 days, I know, for the Formula E Series. Now we got a long wait till essentially 2021, January, when the Formula E Series does return back to racing. And of course, the big thing now, Antonio Felix da Costa, he is the FIA Formula E champion. The other past champions that we have, Lucas di Grassi, Sebastian Buemi, Nelson Piquet, and of course, the two-time champion, Jean-Eric Vern. Coming out of the gate, where would you rank Antonio Felix da Costa right now with those past champions?
Well, certainly, Formula E has been very competitive until the very end in recent years. However, Antonio Felix da Costa, this is the first time we've seen someone completely run away with the championship. And I certainly think that we should consider Antonio Felix da Costa to be one of the most dominant champions so far in Formula E history.
Definitely one of the most dominant champions Formula E history. I know he didn't get as much points as Jean-Eric Vern did 2 years ago, but his consistency compared to everyone else allowed him to essentially take the championship. Now, how do we get there? Of course, we had 2 more races in the Berlin EPrix series. So looking at both races, Antonio Felix da Costa, he started in the back of both races. Of course, race 5, he didn't get a chance to put down a qualifying lap. In the 6th race, he did put down a lap, but he still started way in the back. In that first race, he DNF, had last lap battery issues. And then race 6, he finished 10th to score at least 1 point. Now, one person that definitely took advantage of this situation was Stoffel Vandoorne. He took the pole for the final race and was 1 out of 9 drivers mathematically eligible for second place in the points. Once the green flag came out, Stoffel Vandoorne, he went ahead and took the lead, and he held on to that lead pretty much all race long. One of the big things we were seeing, especially Vandoorne, as he took the lead, he had earned the 3 points for winning the pole. Sebastian Buemi, he got the pole for fastest lap. Not the pole, the 1 point bonus for the fastest lap in qualifying. Now, one of the big surprises was De Vries, who took 3rd place from Rene Rast. Now, Rene Rast started 4th place and got up to, Rene Rast started 3rd place and was up in 4th place. He out-qualified his teammate, Lucas di Grassi. Was that a big surprise for you?
Oh, certainly. Lucas di Grassi has, years of Formula E experience now. Rene Rast only has a couple of races under his belt. And, it seemed like Rene Rast, was starting to get a lot comfortable in the Formula E car, and it's going to be interesting to see, what happens moving forward with Rene Rast in Formula E, since it looks like, DTM's future is looking really, it doesn't look good at the moment. But certainly it was quite a surprise to see Rene Rast qualify his more experienced champion teammate Lucas di Grassi.
Yeah, very surprised. I know even Lucas di Grassi, he said he was in Group 2. He should have a strategic advantage compared to Group 1. Still, he was way in the back, had to really climb his way. And I do agree with you that this was Rene Rast's opportunity to audition for Audi, saying, look, this is my opportunity. I'm making the most of it. I'm scoring points. I want to stay in Formula E. Now, attack mode was really strong, essentially all week long in Berlin. It was a great tool to use to gain positions. We saw people use it as the way to get the undercut under competitors, hold off their position with the timing of getting it. The big thing, though, was Sebastian Buemi. When he got his second attack mode, he did late after both Mercedes had done it, and essentially only was going to climb back to the spot he was in, 2nd place. But then as soon as his attack mode went out, we saw Nick De Vries overtake him. Do you question, essentially the drivers that still are not familiar with when's the best to use attack mode? Because it seemed like using attack mode could really make or break your race now.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit above the Mercedes is definitely, coming on, getting stronger, and also, I think Sebastian Buemi, it was just a missed opportunity in order to capitalize on attack mode right there.
Yeah, very missed opportunity. I know had he gotten it around the same time both Mercedes did, I think he could have easily tried to contend for the win, but he got there late afterwards, and then once he got it, essentially Nick DeVries, he overtook him for second place. Now the second place battle, of course, Oliver Rowland in the Nissan won the previous race, race 5, but he went out of the race late, mechanical issues, so no second place in the championship for him. John Eric Vern, he came in 2 races ago, second in the points. He was looking at trying to get sixth place or better to get second place in the standings. Of course, he needed sixth place or better because Stoffel Vandoorne got the 3 points bonus for winning the pole, and Sebastian Buemi got the 1 point bonus for having the fastest lap in qualifying. With Buemi in third place, that meant he wouldn't get second place. It would look like it was going to come down between Vandoorne and John Eric Vern. Vandoorne delivered, though. He delivered Mercedes' first 1-2 finish for the Berlin EPrix and for in their time in the Formula E Series, their first 1-2 finish. So it's a very exciting day for Mercedes and the Mercedes team. And of course, Vandoorne now gets second in the championship. And with second in the championship, that's some big bragging rights for him and the Mercedes team. Was this the last 2 races we saw? Was this the kind of action you think a lot of people anticipated throughout the entire week where we're going to see positions change frequently?
Oh, definitely. Imagine if we had the kind of drama in these final 2 races, in the final 6 races. If all of the races were like the reverse in the traditional course, I think we could have potentially had a championship fight on our hands because I'm sure Antonio Felix da Costa is happy that he clinched the championship because after he clinched the championship, it seemed like things started to go downhill for him in the Techeetah quite a bit. But certainly they didn't really have anything to lose. Just go out there, have fun racing. It didn't look like they had fun out there to close the season, but definitely, it doesn't take away from the successful season that Antonio Felix da Costa had. Well deserved champion, and certainly it was those final 2 races were really crazy, and it just makes me wonder. And what if we had that amount of craziness in the final 6 races, not just the final 2?
Yeah, definitely. You brought up a really good point about Antonio Felix da Costa. Getting that championship wrapped up, as the races started getting really crazy, he didn't have to stress out about losing the championship. He already had it won. And this was the kind of action everyone anticipated from Formula E. I mean, essentially, we saw second place change so frequently. I know we'll get a little bit later into that. But one of the questions I know a lot of people are asking is the tracks. Of course, we had Berlin host 3 different layouts. The reverse layout, in which we saw Antonio Felix da Costa won both of those races. The traditional layout, in which John Ergvern and Max Gunther both claimed to win. And then, of course, the new layout, which saw Stoffel Vandoorne get the win and Oliver Rowland. Out of the 3 tracks, you have to rank first being the best, third being essentially bottom of the list. Where, where would you rank the tracks when it came, especially to producing the best racing all week long for Formula E?
Well, number one, I'll have the new course because saw 2 really crazy races, and then number two, I'll go with the reverse layout, and then traditional brings up the rear in third. How about you, Joe?
I'll definitely have to probably agree with you. I think I would go with the brand new course. We saw a lot of racing. I think a lot of teams, while they had notes because of the very similar nature it was to the traditional course, still didn't really translate that well. And we just saw all sorts of action. Then, of course, I would go with the traditional course. Now, reverse course, it seemed, even though this was a track nobody really had, notes on, very different, it didn't produce the kind of racing a lot of Formula E fans anticipated. We didn't anticipate, I think, Antonio Felix da Costa going out there and just dominating both races. So definitely, I would have to agree with you with that. Now, of course, next year is going to be really interesting to see when we come to Berlin if they're going to go with the traditional one or maybe a little bit of a hybrid with a new one. But it's going to be really interesting to see how everything turns out after this championship season.
Yeah, yeah, definitely heading into next season is definitely going to be interesting to see how everything shapes up. And before we start talking about next season, let's take a look at the championship standings from this season, starting with the top 10. And Antonio Felix da Costa finished with a whopping 158 points in another zip code. You know, everybody else is in the next town over, and da Costa finished the season with 3 wins. Stoffel Vandoorne was able to barely clip Jean Vern to take second in the championship, stand over the two-time Formula E champion. And after each race, there was a different driver, second place in the standings, and the top 10. You know, looking right here at the end, they're all within a win of second place. So the battle for second was really the major storyline coming out of this championship battle. Yeah, and the rest of the top 10 after Da Costa, Van Dorn, and Verg, Sebastian Buemi was fourth, 1 point over his Nissan teammate, Oliver Rowland, Lucas Degrassi sixth, Mitch Evans seventh, Andre Lauderer eighth, Max Gunther ninth, and Sam Bird rounds out the top 10 in the final championship driver point standings. And, you know, reflecting on the top 10, Joe, who's the biggest surprise right now?
I think the biggest surprise has to definitely be eventually Oliver Rowland. One of the big things, of course, the Nissan team, they were looking really good, but definitely for him, he had a win, then he got that win. The big thing, if he improves his consistency, I think he could really start to contend for the championship next season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how well that team responds. And I think a other surprise too has to be Mitch Evans. Essentially, he did not deliver from what a lot of people thought would be a championship battle between him and Da Costa.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And the only two drivers to maintain the same position entering Berlin and exiting were Antonio Felix da Costa, who ended up clinching the championship early, and Sam Bird in 10th. And but looking at Jaguar, Sam Bird's going to Jaguar next year, and it seemed like things were looking up for Jaguar in a pre-pandemic world. And then once we got to Berlin, it seemed like Jaguar had certainly dropped the ball and lost a step during the shutdown. Especially for Mitch Evans, who came in second in the championship, thought he might have taken the fight to Antonio Felix da Costa. So looking back, on their they may consider this a disappointing performance in the final 6 races to end the season. So, how big of a disappointment was Berlin for Jaguar and Mitch Evans as a whole?
Very disappointing. They came in, they had won in Mexico. A lot of people saw them as they're going to bring the fight to DS Techeetah. The last few seasons, they've been really improving each and every year. This year, Mitch Evans, he was looking really good. James Collado, with the experience he brought, a lot of folks anticipate him to be a factor for the championship even. And then we come to Berlin, and it's like everything just fell apart. Mitch Evans, he spun that first race towards the closing stages, no points. While his opponents for second place in the championship were all scoring points. And then his inconsistency essentially opened him up to lose second place and for teams to start falling behind. So it's definitely has to be a huge disappointment to come in after essentially about a 5 month break from, hey, you got a shot at the championship to, well, try to stay in the top 10. And that's not even discussing the issues James Collado had during the entire week at Berlin.
Yeah, certainly, we thought Jaguar was going to be a strong competitor, but, it just didn't work out that way. And if I'm Sam Bird, who signed on with Jaguar next year, if I'm looking at everything that's going on over there, I'm a little bit worried right now. But hopefully the Jaguar team will, look at what happened in Berlin, evaluate their program, get the car ready for next season, and try to find some of that momentum they had at towards the first half of the season before the pandemic struck. And it's going to be interesting to see if Jaguar is able to rise to the occasion and try to take the fight to DS Techeetah. But, it seems like DS Techeetah is on an island on their own right now. And looking at the last half of the championship, positions 11 through 20, got Nick DeFries, Robin Franz, Alexander Sims, Eduardo Mortara, Rene Rast, Jerome D'Ambrosio, Alex Lynn, Pascal Verline, who we'll talk about later on in the program, some big silly season news that happened. James Collado, who's going to be exiting Formula E, and Neil Johnny, who's also going to be exiting Formula E. And looking at Alexander Sims, he was third in the standings entering Berlin, and he ended up finishing 13th, dropping way down. Joe, can you explain to our viewers what in the world happened to Alexander Sims?
Alexander Sims, I feel, is sort of the victim of the inconsistency in Formula E. He came in third in the championship. He had a win. Last year was his first season with BMW and Andretti. He looked really good, so it's a really surprise to see that Alexander Sims did not have the kind of performance that we had all anticipated from Andretti Autosport, from BMW. So it was definitely a big surprise to see that that had happened. One of the things I really got to say, he has to really rebound. Going from third to 13th, that's a huge drop. But if he could rebound in the next race, I'm really sure he could really try to put together a championship effort, assuming he is with Andretti Autosport.
And one driver not listed on the screen was Felipe Massa, who ended up 22nd in the points. Probably a very disappointing season for Massa. And something crazy happened. Like right after the checker flag yesterday flew on the 2019-20 Formula E season, it was announced on the cooldown lap that Felipe Massa would not return to the Venturi operation next season. And with Felipe Massa, having a bad season, yeah, definitely not the season that Venturi wanted. Are you surprised by his exit, and do you think that he'll be back in Formula E?
That's a really good question. I'm not 100% sure on that answer, but definitely we do have somebody that could fill us in about Massa and next year. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, please welcome from Formula E, Joe and Jack. Jack, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me here again. And I've just been listening while you've been talking about Felipe Massa. And honestly, I think Felipe Massa, probably his time is done in Formula E. It was very pivotal. What he said the other day was pivotal. And I knew on Sunday that this might be over, right? He said it's not fun anymore. And when you say it's not fun anymore, to me, that's the sign that a driver is going to leave, right? And I thought, is Massa going to leave? And we talked about it on the Formula E Zone live shows. We said, I posed that question. The way Venturi did it by having literally at the line, right? And then as the race finished, literally the announcement happened. We were all in shock. We were like, wow, what a time to do it. But yeah, I honestly, he's 39 years of age. I know he's probably could still race in Formula E, but I think his time is up.
Yeah, it seems like.
Yes. I was gonna say certainly, Jack. I agree with you there. They always say when it's not fun anymore, then it's just time to leave. And I'm not sure what's gonna be next for Felipe Massa's racing career. Is it gonna go like endurance racing? I don't think it's gonna go IndyCar because he was very critical of their safety standards, especially on oval racing. And Joe, you wanted to add in right there?
Yeah, I was gonna just pretty much say when Felipe Massa said he was not having fun, that's when I was thinking he ain't gonna come back. This year, only 3 points. Wasn't that great of a season. I know the big highlight was Monaco getting third place for the Venturi team, which is based out of Monaco. But essentially, it seemed like the writing was all the wall, and I was surprised with how it was handled, the news. But definitely, it was sort of more surprising to see that right there, after the checker flag came out, oh, and heads up, Massa's not coming back. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the podium.
Yeah, it was weird. It was so weird. Like, I don't understand Venturi's timing. If they knew he was going to go, they could have released it before the race to say, you know what, we're finished. He's finished. This is his last race. I'm going to pose a question to you. Because I did it to my chat yesterday, right? Nelson Piquet Jr. was at the racetrack and obviously commentating on this weekend. But Nelson Piquet Jr. isn't a commentator, right? He's too chilled. He's too laid back for that, right? So, yes, it was crazy the way that Massa, but just a quick question. I want to hear your thoughts. Kobe, I'll go to you. Do you think Piquet was there hunting around for drives and actually to try and get himself back into Formula E?
Well, Jack, the interesting question you brought up. I certainly think, that is possible. When I know we see drivers all the time who aren't currently racing in certain series at the time, in paddocks all over the world. And although they say they're just there like visiting or whatever, but you always know their drivers are they're hunting for rides. So it's really interesting you say, Nelson Piquet Jr. I'm sure it would be interesting to see him return to Formula E. I remember seeing an article earlier back this year that Piquet was trying to actually return to NASCAR to race in the Gander RV and Outdoors Truck Series. But in the world of motorsports, things can change in the blink of an eye. And and certainly, since Venturi has a seat open right now, if Nelson, and Nelson Piquet Jr. in the paddock, anything is possible. I'm sure it would definitely be a shock return to see PK return with Venturi. Yeah, that's all a part of silly season. Speculation, lots of fun. Trying to figure out where drivers are going to be competing next season.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I know Dario was in Indy, so they had Nelson there, but I feel like you wouldn't go to Berlin just to be like, yeah, sure, I could commentate and be in a photo with all the past champions and your current champion, Antonio Felix da Costa. You're going to be there talking to the other teams. You got friends in the paddock. You're friends in the teams. Hey, so do you think you have an opening tomorrow? What do you think are the chances of your team being competitive next year? He was definitely, I feel, fishing around looking for something for next year. The big thing I think we all got to see, as Kobe said, with motorsports, so much that could happen. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what develops in the offseason for Nelson Piquet.
Yeah, I know we talked about Nelson Piquet Jr. Are there any other drivers do you think that could potentially be in contention for the Venturi seat?
We were discussing Jake Hughes, who's currently driving in the Formula 3. I didn't realize he was 26 years of age. So again, a part of the HWA, which is also Mercedes, sort of like in that partnership group. So if there was a driver that they wanted to make a step up, or sort of, he's 26, so even though he's in F3, like he's not even in F2 yet. So maybe his chance at Formula One's gone. So maybe a career in Formula E could be good for Jake Hughes.
That's a good pick. Definitely, I think with Venturi, one of the things I'm starting to wonder if they're going to start looking again within the Formula E. They tried with Massa outside Formula E, but now Formula E is getting so competitive. If you have the experience and skills in Formula E, you could come in running. We saw that with Mahindra when Pascal Wehrlein came out. We saw essentially, here comes Alex Lynn. Hey, he got some points. That could be a good option, but definitely it's going to be something where it's going to be really interesting to see where to go for their next driver.
Yeah, and I have no idea who they're going to choose for the seat. But yeah, that's the great thing about Formula E. You have no idea what's going to happen, whether it's on or off the track. Yeah, and one thing, thinking about Antonio Felix da Costa and Diaz Techeetah, that they had a wonderful season. Although the final two races, it seemed like everything broke out, and it all went crazy. So it definitely, as I mentioned earlier, definitely doesn't take away for what they've done this season. Incredible year. And looking at their competitors, who do you think came out ahead and behind this season?
As in who done like who's been good and who's not done so good this season? I think who's done well. I think you got to go for Mercedes, finishing second in the championship. I think they've done brilliantly. And I think for me, for a team that hasn't done so well, I think Neo and Dragon are expected, to be honest with you. So I'm going to go with Jaguar. And I'll bring this up because I think this was a good talking point that we had. I think this showed that Jaguar made a mistake in hiring James Collado, because you have to remember back to season 5. At the end of season 5, they had Alex Lynn. And obviously, we've seen how good Alex Lynn has been once he stepped back in that Mahindra. So on that basis, yes, they had a great start to the season, but they did absolutely nothing in Berlin. And they probably signed the wrong driver, in all honesty. And I think for that reason, I think Jaguar are probably the team that has slightly underperformed. I think BMW as well. And I think I heard you guys talking about BMW and like Alexander Sims before I came. And again, I think he's another driver on the chopping block that could be replaced in the off-season, because he had a chance. He had 2 big chances in that race, in those couple of races actually, to score big points, and he didn't. And I think for me, that's another window. So if you're a team like BMW, who was second in the standings and finished 5th, maybe you look at your driver lineup and go, well, Maximilian Gunther won. What did Alex Sims do in this 6th race? Only picked up a few points. Is that good enough for BMW? So, but yeah, I'll stick with Jaguars, my bad team, possibly BMW in there as well, and my good team as Mercedes.
I would say Mercedes definitely is a good example of a team that did really well. One team I'm also looking at that did pretty good too has to be Nissan. I know they got the win with Oliver Rowland. They look overall pretty good and strong. I think next year they could come back even a little bit better and contend for that championship. When it comes to teams that I fell more behind, I would say one of them has to be Venturi. I know last year they really thought, okay, entering this season we have some momentum, we could gain some more grounds. That didn't really seem to happen, and they had a second year with Massa, Eduardo Montoya. I really thought they were going to perform a little bit better. Then Jaguar, that's a really good example as well. A lot of folks saw them rising each season, and then they just collapsed in Berlin. And it just really was surprising to see that. So it's definitely, I think, one of those things where, especially Jaguar, Andretti Autosport, Venturi, I feel they have the most to gain for next year.
Yeah, certainly. I agree when you say that, Mercedes, the team that come out ahead. If I'm the Mercedes Formula E team, I'm really excited about the future with Stoffel Vandoorne and Nick DeVries as my drivers. Maybe Mercedes can take the fight to DS Techeetah next season. It'll be interesting to see how much they can improve over the offseason. Maybe they'll even be ahead of DS Techeetah, so we can have a Silver Arrows domination in Formula One and Formula E. So, there'll be a lot of smiles going around the Mercedes camp. And for the teams that are behind, I have to agree with Jack. I can't decide between Jaguar and BMW Andretti. I think it's a tie between both. Jaguar doing great early on in the season. Then we got to Berlin, and it seemed like they had a drop off in performance. Mitch Evans, you know, thought he would contend for the championship. Didn't Things didn't really work out for him. And James Collado, he just didn't adapt to the car, as Jack mentioned in our previous Formula E Fest programs. And Collado looks like he's not going to be coming back to Formula E anytime soon. Going to be focusing on his World Endurance Championship duties with, yeah, of course, and BMW, and yeah, Max Gunther. If Max Gunther, can have a little bit more consistency, I think he's going to be all right. And I also agree that you have to look at Alexander Sims and evaluate his performances. In my opinion, it seems like Alexander Sims is a much better endurance racing driver, in the BMW GT car than he is in Formula E. But definitely, I'm sure over the offseason, BMW is going to evaluate its Formula E lineup.
Yeah, they'll be definitely evaluating the Formula E lineup, and of course next year too. It's going to be really interesting. 2021 season. Today we heard the news. Porsche confirmed Pascal Wehrlein will join the team next year, replacing Neil Johnny, who will remain with the manufacturer but not in the Formula E seat. My question for both of you: how do you think Pascal Wehrlein will perform next year? Especially he's going to be alongside Andre Lauderer.
I think that makes the team better instantly. I feel sorry for Neil Yanni. Yes, he did get it on the last 2 races, but I think it was way too little too late for Neil Yanni. But obviously, as Kobe said, he's a great world endurance racing driver. So I'm sure he'll be okay, and he'll find another drive somewhere else within the Porsche program. But I think Wehrlein and Lotterer, that's a mean lineup, right? And we're starting to get some mean lineups going into next season in terms of, Bird and Mitch Evans now, and Lotterer and Wehrlein, Vandoorne, De Vries, Da Costa, Vern. Like, these are some top driver lineups. And as I said, you need drivers that are going to perform in Formula E. So I think, Wehrlein will make Porsche, will make him better.
Yeah, certainly. I think Verlon is definitely going to push his teammate Andre Lauderer to the fullest. Verlon, very very talented young driver, and still is going to accomplish a lot in his career. And Andre Lauderer, I believe he's definitely one of the top drivers out there. And as Jack mentioned, having that strong lineup, Verlon and Lauderer definitely makes Porsche better. and over the off season, getting the car ready for next season, it's certainly going to be interesting to watch Porsche and see how hard they can push, how how fast the car is going to be. Yeah, and definitely, when you add a driver of those credentials to your driver lineup, you instantly get better. Very unfortunate for Neil Yanni. You know, he ended the season on a high note, but overall in the season, it didn't really go well for Yanni. Yeah, yeah, definitely had a lot of success in sports car racing. He's going to remain with Porsche in their future motorsports programs. And speaking of future motorsports programs, one thing that Porsche is evaluating is a LMDH program. You, the next top level prototype formula where you'll be able to take a top flight prototype, whether it's LMDH or the Le Mans hypercar, and you can compete for the overall win at the 24 Hours of Le Mans or the Rolex 24 Daytona, 12 Hours of Sebring, Petite Le Mans, 6 Hours of Spa, all of that. And I'm sure, definitely with a potential LMDH program on the horizon and Neil Johnny's past success in sports car racing, I'm sure Porsche will definitely keep him around for that if that program gets the green light.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like that program is going to be really good fit for Neil Johnny. And it's really interesting. Formula E has really become to the point where it's becoming very competitive to get a seat in the series of Formula E. You see Neil Johnny, he came from sports cars, James Collado from touring cars. They're all now looking at sitting the outside. And of course, Felipe Massa, which we talked about earlier on. Now, of course, everybody is going to be playing catch up to DS Techeetah. And that includes Porsche as well. Porsche, lots of people see it as sort of like they have a lot of resources as well as Mercedes and Audi. When it comes to next year and chasing the Cheetah team, who do you feel that the Cheetah is now sort of the Mercedes of Formula One or the Roger Penske of IndyCar, where they're the big super team and it's a matter of trying to catch up to them? Or do
Of
you feel
course. Yeah, I feel they're the team to beat and rightly deserved what Mark Preston and that team have done there. And remember, DS, they didn't build an amazing powertrain to begin with, right? And Techeetah weren't winning, were winning. Sorry, my apologies. They were winning before DS arrived with the Renault powertrain when Jean-Eric Verne won his first championship in season 4. So, on that notice, I think, yes, DS have obviously built a really good powertrain, but the Techeetah team, the engineers behind that team, really know how to develop and move a powertrain forward. And that's what I think the likes of Mercedes and teams that are going to catch them need to learn. Talk about Porsche right there. I think Porsche have the biggest catch-up job to do because you're looking at Mercedes, who've made a big step forward. Then you take Audi, for example. They look like they made a step forward. They had the worst car out of the big German manufacturers. I think that was clear to see going into Berlin. But they made some improvements during this, and the pace was getting much better towards the end, which was proven by Rene Rast. And then I've forgotten the other one at this precise moment is gone. I think I've named them all. And then you've got BMW, that's the other one. Like, they're there or thereabouts, right? But again, if they get a good, strong lineup with Gunther and they get someone to match Maximilian Gunther, they could be strong. So I think Porsche, in terms of those big manufacturers, have the most to catch up. But yeah, I think Mercedes, Nissan, they're not far behind. I don't think Jaguar are that far behind either. I feel like Berlin must just not have suited them. Let's see what happens when they go back to Santiago, a track where they got pole at, but they didn't have a good race pace. Let's see if they can get the race pace better, and maybe Jaguar could be there as well. I don't know. It's going to be incredibly tight. That's all we know. We're going to hype up that Season 7 could be the most chaotic, crazy, brilliant season ever, but it could be, as I said yesterday, that Techeetah could just build another brilliant car with DS powertrain and they can walk it.
Yeah, Techeetah definitely looking like the team to beat right now, but Mercedes coming on strong, and like you mentioned, some other teams have work to do as well, and I'm sure they're gonna work really hard over the off season to develop a car capable of taking the fight to DS Techeetah, Antonio Felix da Costa, and Jean-Eric Vergne. Yeah, looking ahead to next season, it could be really crazy, especially if those teams find several tenths in order to catch up to DS Techeetah, and I'm sure the championship battle would definitely be a lot closer. Like you mentioned, if we can return to a somewhat normal schedule next year and go to other tracks instead of just remaining in Berlin, teams can maximize the capability of their car at other venues instead of just having a car in the same city, Berlin.
Yeah, definitely sounds like we're also in agreement where Techeetah is the team to beat. Mercedes, they're right there. And then, of course, the teams such as Porsche, Audi, Nissan, they're all looking and improving to try to reclaim the top spot again. Now, one of the big things, of course, Jack mentioned briefly about BMW and Ready next year, but two other teams that have won and have success in the past, Envision Virgin, and Mahindra. Of course, we know there's going to be driver change for both teams. Next season, do you feel they both have potential to rebound and get back into victory lane?
I think Virgin definitely. Depending on the Audi powertrain, they seem to be very good at understanding the software and getting on top of the powertrain very quickly, whereas Audi didn't do that this season. So I think Virgin could definitely be a threat. Again, being a customer team, a lot of it relies on Audi. So if Audi build a good powertrain and are up there, I can envision Virgin being up there as well, and in that fight. And again, but it's all about consistency in Formula E. It doesn't matter if you have the fastest powertrain. It helps. It helps. Don't get me wrong. But with the teams being so close, if you make that mistake in qualifying, like Mercedes, they should have probably won the Saturday race as well but they both, Nick de Vries hit the wall and broke his steering, and Vandoorne made an error on his qualifying lap. And then we see the pace that they had on Sunday, and you think, well, and I tried to ask the question. They didn't ask that question. I was a bit like, oh, come on. But I asked the question as if, does this make Saturday's race harder to take simply because this is what you achieved on Sunday, and basically the same thing happened again on Sunday. Just this time they qualified at the back of the grid rather than not qualifying the top runners. Rather than actually they started from the back and had to race through like exactly what happened on Saturday. But Formula E didn't decide to ask my question, so we'll never know how the Mercedes driver felt for that. But yeah, I've sort of lost my point. I'm very sorry, Joe. But yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of work that other people need to do and so forth to catch up with Techeetah, but it's so close.
Yeah, definitely, Jack. You mentioned it's so close. Formula E is always very close. Look at that championship battle all the way back from second to 10th place. All with, as mentioned earlier in the program, all within one win of getting up there and taking second place. Yeah, if we had another race left in the season, Sam Bird could technically move all the way up there behind Antonio Felix da Costa, which is really crazy. And imagine, if those other teams just found a few tenths heading into next season to catch up with Techeetah, we would definitely have a mega battle for the championship.
Mega battle, that would be just really entertaining. I think the fans would really love that as well too. Now, of course, we have a really long off season this year compared to past years. Do you feel like this is going to help some of the teams or hurt the teams? And is there any particular teams you all feel could benefit the most from this really long off season?
It depends on what happens. The team that could benefit the most is Neo. If they decide to actually buy a Season 7 powertrain from a decent manufacturer, for example, if they buy a DS powertrain, they could become the second or third fastest team. And that could be the reason like Oliver Turvey stays at Neo, because I was touting that maybe BMW should, if I fully believe Alexander Sims has driven his last race in Formula E. I'll be surprised if he's there in Season 7. I'll be delighted if he's there because, as I said, for new fans of Formula E, and I think I said it in the first show, I said if there's a driver to look out for Alexander Sims, because he's such a nice guy and he's a very good racing driver. But even for me, I'm like, mate, you had your chance to prove yourself and you didn't. And I think he's left. So therefore, if Neo, for example, do not, get a decent powertrain, a Season 7 powertrain, because remember, this season they were using a Season 5 Dragon powertrain, so not a good powertrain to begin with, and a year old. So no wonder why they were 1.5 seconds off the pace and Apt and Oliver Turvey could do nothing. But if Neo decide to go down the route of buying a powertrain and having a good go of it for Season 7, maybe there's no reason for Turvey to leave. But if they do not and they stick with an old powertrain or a Season 6 powertrain, then maybe Oliver Turvey, I think, should be looking at a move to BMW. I think that would make sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the teams that could really benefit the most from the long off season are definitely the back market. You mentioned like Neo, Dragon, and then Venturi has struggles as well. You definitely need to take full advantage of this extra time off in order to evaluate your entire program from top to bottom, not just your driver lineups, but also the people working within the team. And Joe and I, we've discussed this on several programs and other disciplines of motorsports. It's not just the drivers on the team that are being evaluated. It's absolutely everyone out there that's been evaluated. The performance, and if you're not doing well, there's always somebody out there who's better than you that will make sure that they're putting themselves in the right position to take your job. Very competitive, cutthroat environment in motorsports in general. So it would not surprise me if we see a lot of changes, not with the driver lineups, but also internally as well.
I think just to add a point on that very quickly, I think it was very true what you say, Kobe. And Venturi, I feel, have probably one of the biggest things to actually grow on because they've got that Mercedes powertrain. That's why I feel like PK should be so interested if he does want to return because we know that Mercedes powertrain is good. And Venturi, to be fair, from last seasons, did make a step up this season, right? With that Mercedes powertrain. They were better than when they were making their own powertrain. So I think another year of a Mercedes cycle, a new driver with Massa going, we know Mortara is good. And I think they could be a dark horse. They could really be a dark horse, Venturi, next season.
Yeah, that could be really interesting to see how Venturi will respond next season. Now, one thing I want to throw out there, we mentioned about Neo. They seem to be the team that has the most to gain. Now that they have Daniel Abt, we know he lost his ride with Audi, went to Neo. Do you think he could be a potential for next year in the Neo team? And does he bring additional resources? I know, like what we're seeing, for example, NASCAR, Bubba Wallace is bringing a lot of sponsors to his team that's going to help out. Do you think if Apt's there, he could help out the team?
Apt will bring a lot of markability to Neo for sure. I don't know about any sponsors or anything. I'm not 100% sure on that. There's probably potential, but Daniel Apt is one of those. He's a content creator on YouTube. Definitely, I don't know if he has a drive for Neo next season because Marching War is still in this. I know Ed's watching in chat, but he does have a contract. Yes, he has signed for a touring car team. But that doesn't stop him from racing in Formula E at the same time because, as we see with drivers in the WEC series, people can do multiple disciplines. So Ma does have a contract for next season. So again, it's up to Ma whether or not he decides to walk away like Massa has done because Massa had another year's contract for next season. So it'll be up to Ma to decide if he's going to walk away. What Ma's been saying is that he's not going to walk away, but obviously things can change, and that could have just been PR speak that he'd said. And then if Ma does leave, then Daniel Abt, should be a shoe-in for that team. And if they do get a decent powertrain next season, then you'd expect Daniel Abt to do quite well in that car alongside Oliver Turvey, or if Oliver Turvey leaves for another team, another driver, or it could even be Abt and Ma. You never know going into next season with Neo. But I think Abt should be a shoe-in for that seat because I think he's probably one of the better drivers there that Neo can take and has tons of Formula E experience. So let's see what happens.
Yes, certainly. Let's see what happens. Although some of the lineups are set in stone right now, have no idea like what's gonna happen. Because some drivers who we think are safe right now, heading into next year's Formula E season, they might actually be out, and there might be some drivers in other disciplines right now, not on the Formula E radar, who might check it out next season and see if they're fit to be a Formula E driver. And Formula E definitely gaining a lot of momentum with these killer driver lineups. Verlon Lauderer, then we got Da Costa and Berg returning next season. And then you got Stoffel Vandoorne, Nick DeFries. Crazy, crazy talent in the field.
Crazy talent. I'm almost anticipating somebody from Formula 2 maybe making the jump to Formula E next year, depending on how everything looks in Formula 1. But definitely is getting really big and popular. One of the big things, of course, Berlin now has this unique record. They've hosted the most Formula E events, 13 total. Of course, one of them was in the Berlin street circuit, but all of them at Tempelhof Ring. If Formula E did the right thing in ending the season so quickly with 6 races in 9 days at one location?
I think they did, because if you have a look at Europe now with coronavirus, everything's rising again, and all of a sudden countries are putting quarantine lists on, this country, and you can't go to this country and you need to quarantine for 14 days. So I think Formula E just about luckily fit it in at the right time. It probably came just at the right time. So let's see what happens with that. Yeah, I think that's all I've got to say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Jack, right there, with making that point. With the virus cases rising in Europe, virus cases rising everywhere in the world. Especially right here home in the United States for me. And when you're trying to look at all the other places that Formula E race, it will be really hard for them, to travel. Although Formula One is doing it right now, it'd be hard for still. I think Formula E is doing the right thing instead. Well, they did the right thing by racing in Berlin, one venue, 6 races in 9 days, keeping everybody in one location instead of going around the world, potentially putting others at risk. It just shows that Formula E, really cares about the health of everyone working in the paddock and wants to make sure that they don't potentially put them in harm's way. And I think putting them in like a little, I'm not sure if you would call it a bubble, but but in a smaller location where the people do not have to go far, so we can get those 6 races done, 9 days, pack up, go home, and have a wonderful off season.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you. I know watching, especially here in the United States, NASCAR, IndyCar, they're still changing their season. A lot of things up in the air for Formula E to say, hey, we still have half a season, a little more than half the season to go. Let's just put together these 6 events, 9 days, and one venue to end the season. Of course, I feel this also made it where it was a lot of fun. The last 9 days, I've really enjoyed covering Formula E, having race after race after race, having these special programs, the Formula E Fest. Wow, it's been a fun 9 days, and I am really sad that it is coming to the end. But one thing for sure, of course, we know Berlin's going to be in the schedule next year. And this is a question I want to throw definitely for both of you. When it comes to a racing series having marquee events, for example, Formula One, Monaco, a lot of people put Silverstone up there. NASCAR has Daytona 500, Southern 500, IndyCar, Indianapolis 500, and Long Beach. When it comes to Formula E, we have Monaco, the full circuit. A lot of people will put that up there. Because of Berlin essentially saving this season, do you feel Berlin now sort of has that statue of one of the big races in the Formula E season everyone wants to win?
I think, well, maybe it depends. I think it's a really interesting question, and I've posed this. I said this: will in 20 years, 30 years time, Formula E have an iconic race? And I said yes, if they, stay at a specific city. And Berlin seems to be the best city to stay at this precise moment, and a city that Formula E can really, grow around. But I'm not a big fan, and this was something that they were been touting, and obviously we've done it. Was we could make new venues, new racetracks every single time we go to Berlin. And I think if Formula E do that, then Berlin won't become one of these places which will hold much significance in Formula E, because if the track changes every year, then it's not special. Like, I think they've got a good track with the with the traditional layout. And I'm, to be honest with you, I'm for a double header at Berlin taking place every year, because there's the potential to do it. And you have one race in the normal traditional layout and one race in the reverse. And all you have to do is someone at the end of the day has got to switch all the marker boards around to make sure it all fits. And, they did that in 2 days. So I reckon they could do it in one evening, to be honest with you. And it probably was done in one evening, majority of that. So if they go down the route of changing the tracks, I don't think Berlin will become one of these places that, Formula E has been to. Like, Silverstone is special because it's been in lit pretty much the majority of the Formula One championship seasons. And if you start, and the track hasn't really changed much from that time. Obviously, it's had modifications, but the heart of the track hasn't changed much. And if Berlin loses that heart, then it won't become special at all.
Well, I certainly think that Berlin is going to be special, for obvious reasons, because I think we're going to remember, this 6 races in 9 days extravaganza for a while now, because of the pandemic right now, unprecedented situation where we had to finish the season, in one city, and Jack brought up some, really good points. Like right now, with Berlin, you definitely, right now, I think it's certainly a special city right now, especially in Formula E. I'm not sure if winning here is going to be considered the crown jewel event, and Joe also mentioned, Formula E has Monaco as well, but that's the crown jewel event for Formula One. I'm not sure if that will become the Formula E crown jewel event. Just Formula E is still, extremely young in its history. Very short history so far, and Formula E, keeps going years and years down the road. Maybe we'll be able to find that marquee event on the Formula E calendar that every driver wants to win, kind of like the Indianapolis 500, Daytona 500, Monaco Grand Prix. That event where you win, you break down in tears in victory lane, the top step of the podium.
Yeah, definitely when it comes to a marquee event, I feel, especially for all of us that we went through this 9 days at Berlin, Berlin sort of holds a special place for me. Especially, I feel it's particularly saved the season for Formula E. And the nice part about Berlin, it's such a unique space where traditionally we could have a crowd there. If we had a doubleheader weekend, it could be really accessible for fans there. We got a lot of space for even like post race concerts, all sorts of fun activities to go on. So definitely, I feel like it will be like probably one of the top three events, especially if they don't change up the circuit every year. That first corner, the traditional circuit, I feel is a classic that you see everywhere. Every time we talk about Berlin, you see clips of that corner. So definitely going to be really interesting to see as Formula E grows. Taking a look at the season for next year, of course, it all starts at Santiago, Chile. Mexico City, I know one of our viewers said that could be a potential marquee event because it is a classic race course as well. Then Saudi Arabia has the first doubleheader. China, Italy, and France round the first 7 races, half the season. And then here we go to Monaco, which we just talked about. That could be one of the big marquee events. South Korea. Then we have a one date that a lot of folks are going to be following to see where that race will take place. Then there's Berlin. Right now, just scheduled for one race. That could always maybe change. New York City, Brooklyn, then of course London. Now, of course, the schedule is subject to change, and especially with everything going on with the pandemic, I think it's safe to say there's still a lot of questions in the air. Now, one of the big things we just saw the season, but we noticed May there's a couple of good little openings there as well. So we're gonna get a little bit of that about Formula E drivers and possibly maybe an IndyCar, Indy 500.
Yeah, Formula E is gonna be, recognized as a world championship next season by the FIA. Huge step for Formula E, especially when they launched this series, several years ago. I didn't know what to expect, but after watching it grow over the years, I certainly expected it, to become recognized by the FIA at some point. So you're not just gonna be a Formula E champion, you're gonna be a Formula E world champion, just like we say Formula One world champion. Definitely a big deal for Formula E. And since the championship is going to be recognized by the FIA, do you think this is going to increase the demand from drivers to get into Formula E?
I think the demand's already quite high, Kobe. To be honest with you, possibly it may do. I just think it's really good for Formula E to have that status because now it's like proper recognizable, and then younger drivers will start hearing world championship more, right? Not just Formula E champion, Formula E world champion. I think that for younger drivers coming through and when they start thinking about what career path they want to take and where they want to go with their careers, Formula One will always be the pinnacle. Formula One will always be what the kids are aiming for. But at the age of 17, 18, 19, 20, when they have got to make a decision and looking and evaluating their careers, for example, they may go, you know what, Formula E is a really good championship, and I can be a world champion there. And there's, look at the world champions that have already been there. So it's actually a good series to maybe take up, I think.
Definitely will be a great series to take up. And one of the things I think excuse me, one of the things you point out, for a kid growing up, seeing Formula E, the world champion, one of the things I think Formula E really stands out from Formula One is essentially their awareness of climate change. I know when it came to the last few races, they had a moment of reflection, a moment of silence before each race, and they discussed for everyone that's victimized by this pandemic, for climate change, for the racial injustice. I think if Formula E really sort of targets their message to these fans that care more about, social issues, climate change, I could see somebody that really is involved in those issues being like, I'm a big fan of Formula E. And I think Formula E could get a different crowd, especially since we race in the cities. Whereas in the Formula One, United States NASCAR, they race on racetracks located outside the cities. Could be, I think, a really big boom and get some more drivers, especially younger drivers, more interested in Formula E.
Yeah, Formula E drivers currently racing. Well, some of the Formula E drivers currently racing other disciplines such as touring cars, sports cars. Various disciplines outside of Formula E. With Formula, Jack mentioned it. As Jack mentioned, the demand is already high. For drivers trying to get into Formula E and becoming recognized by the FIA. As an official world championship. Do you think, with drivers running in other disciplines, do you think that's going to come to an end, or you think that Formula E is going to have to be their main program?
I think it won't come to an end, honestly, but I do think Formula E will become these drivers' main programs, and I think you're starting to already see that. I think James Collado going away to World Endurance Championship was an anomaly now, because his FE career was effectively done because he was replaced by Jaguar. There was no real point in him being there for the final two races, you can argue. So he left, but at the same time, Nick DeFries now is in the World Endurance Championship. Antonio Felix da Costa is now at Spa. Sebastian Buemi is now at Spa. But they missed that first practice session that James Collado missed. Alex Lynn decided to miss that practice session, obviously Aston Martin, but to race, and he would rather, be in Formula E than in that Aston Martin seat. So I think we're already starting to see that shift. And I think, the likes of James Collado leaving now early to do another race is also interesting. Nico Muller as well is at the DTM this weekend. And he was fastest in practice 1 today. And that took me by surprise. I didn't realize DTM was also running this weekend. And, Nico Muller, who could arguably have had a horrible 6 races in Berlin, goes and makes himself feel better in DTM.
Yeah, I do agree that we are seeing that shift now where Formula E is becoming the primary focus for these drivers. I still remember when Buemi missed races to go for another commitment, and that could have cost him the championship. So definitely, I think it's going to be really interesting to see the series grow in importance for the drivers. And then now with the world championship status, I know one of our viewers say that's really going to be helpful for the manufacturers. That'd be really interesting if we see more manufacturers. I'd love to see an American manufacturer like Chevrolet or Ford enter Formula E and having that world championship status, having the drivers committed to racing in Formula E, I think is a win for everybody.
Yeah, for me, on that point, I want the same. I exactly want the same, especially Chevrolet. I've got a soft spot for that Chevrolet because of how loud that car is. The C7, I haven't really had. I don't think the C8 is as loud as the C7. But the C7, oh my God, when I heard that, I fell in love with it. And I've always thought, just take over Dragon. They're an American team. Like, just go. But obviously, and you've got Jay Penske there. And obviously with Roger Penske, and he's got links with Ford. He's also got links with Chevrolet, I believe, with his IndyCar program. So, like, the link is there. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand why Dragon make their own powertrain. They should be, I don't mind it. Chevrolet Dragon or Dragon Ford Dragon sounds great, right? Keep the Dragon side of it, fine. Yeah, but let Ford make your powertrain. I don't know why that hasn't happened sooner. I'm flabbergasted, really.
Yeah, definitely be interesting to see Chevrolet or Ford, over there in Formula E. And you mentioned, with Roger Penske, Jay Penske, the connections are definitely there, and maybe that'll be something that comes online down the road. And actually, the sister brand for Chevrolet, Cadillac, actually just released a new electric road vehicle. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on, because GM is starting to get more they're starting to get more into the electric scene. And speaking of IndyCar, you mentioned Roger Penske's Chevrolet Power IndyCar operation. The Indy 500 is right around the corner, and in the Formula E season next year has 2 races in the month of May, but not on Indy 500 weekend. I believe not on qualifying weekend as well. Do you think we could potentially see a Formula E driver in the Indy 500 next year, or do you think that I lost my train of thought there for a second.
I'm gonna say not. Okay, I'm gonna say not, Kobe, but I'm not gonna rule out that a driver that has been in Formula E will race in IndyCar at some point. Maybe not next season. I think it's unlikely. But Sam Bird's already said that he's interested. We had Nelson Piquet Jr. If he doesn't come, I'd count that as a Formula E driver going in, right? I'd count that. Okay. So I think on that reason alone, I think we may see him in the future. Maybe not next season, but in the future.
I would love to see a Formula E driver enter the Indy 500. Depending on how things go by May in the championship, I think it's going to be really interesting to see. Because I do think we're going to see, essentially, as the importance of the Formula E championship grows, we're going to see drivers remain more committed to Formula E. But definitely, I think it'll be really exciting to see if there's going to be a Formula E driver in the Indy 500 next year.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I'm not sure if we're going to see a Formula E driver in the Indy 500 next year, but maybe in the future. But just for fun, if you guys had to predict a current Formula E driver in the Indy 500 one day, who would it be?
I don't know. I don't know who in. I want to think someone that's actually realistic. Sorry, my cat has just jumped up on my desk. I'm gonna go for. I have a feeling it'll be like a Brazilian. I don't know. For some reason, Lucas Di Grassi's name just keeps to be jumping out on me.
Lucas Di Grassi is a good one. I think I might go somewhere. If I had to guess somebody, I might guess probably like a Robert Fringe, who has worked with Andretti before, and Michael Andretti could just be like, "Hey, want to try the Indy 500 next year?" So that would be, if out of all the current people, that's who I could think of. So
yeah, and I'm not really sure, but I'll go out on a limb and say maybe Jean-Eric Vergne might, because he's had connections with Andretti before, I believe. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Jack. I believe he does have connections with Andretti. Jean-Eric Vergne.
Jean-Eric Vern obviously did race with Andretti in his first season, so that was the team that he started with. So yes, potentially there are obviously Marco, he's at some of the races with BMW, not all of them, but especially when it comes to New York. So it'd be definitely there in the paddock if anyone wants to ask.
Definitely, that's going to be really exciting to see how everything turns out for next year in the Formula E season and with the other series going on. Unfortunately, we have to wait 155 days now until the next race for Formula E. Now, of course, definitely we encourage all our viewers, FormulaEZone.com. You'll all be following the silly season. I know you got a great community on Discord, and definitely have the passion for Formula E. And definitely, we're just looking forward to next year. I know, should we anticipate any big announcements going forward? I know we got Pascal Wehrlein announced today, Bird already, Massa. Do you see any big announcements coming ahead in the offseason?
I can't say I see any big, but I'm expecting big. I'm expecting a driver announcement at BMW, who that could be. I think Oliver Turvey is the right person for that job. So I don't know. I think that would be the big. If Oliver Turvey signed for BMW for next season, I think that would be a huge story.
It will be really big. Now, definitely, I know it's been a fun 9 days working with y'all. Well, actually 10 days, because we started one day earlier and we're ending a day later than the Formula E Fest. But definitely want to thank you all for making this possible on the Grid Network and with Formula E Zone. Give you all a chance for closing comments, and I'll go ahead and start. I know I just want to thank Jack, Formula E Zone. Great job all week. It's been a lot of fun working with you. Kobe, thank you so much for participating with all these special programs. I know we got Indy 500 going on right now, so you're doing double duty. Definitely looking forward.
Right here on the TV.
Definitely looking forward to next year when Formula E season kicks off again. And just want to, again, thank you all for making this possible.
No, thank you. It's been an absolute crazy 9 days, crazy period, and maybe even the days leading up to that, and even like today. It's been absolutely fun. It's an absolute pleasure to have been on these shows. So pleasure for inviting and coming up with the idea, Joe, because it was a great idea to come up with. But yeah, brilliant. Shame it's come to an end, but I'm sure this will be the start of a fruitful relationship between the two organizations.
Yeah, certainly. It's certainly been a pleasure doing this 6 races in 9 days. I remember when Joe, first approached me with the idea of Formula E Fest. I was like, this might be something that could be really interesting. And then hearing how Formula E's on, you, Jack, your team interested in being a part of this, I thought definitely had a lot of potential, to be something great, and for sure, definitely exceeded my expectations. And as you mentioned, definitely looking forward to growing the relationship between the Grid Network and Formula E Zone as we head into the future, because I'm sure we're going to be working together a lot with Formula E coverage moving forward.
Definitely.
Definitely. I know definitely anytime you're ever interested in being on the program, especially Formula One, or if you want to get your hands wet into NASCAR, I know some people are like, yeah, definitely you're always welcome. For Jack at Formula E Zone, Kobe at the Podium Finish, I'm Joe Samaniego. We want to thank everyone for watching. It's been a lot of fun. Definitely subscribe to Formula E Zone on YouTube. They're up there on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
I was going to say we're at 49 subscribers right now for Grid Network. So if we could get one more, great. But definitely check out Formula E Zone as well. Joe Samaniego from the Grid Network. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you all next time.